Sometimes as humans, we're all a little evil, right? I'm sure in your past, some of you guys have either gotten cheated on or been the cheater, you dirty little dog. And whoever was on the receiving end of the cheating is thinking like, damn, what an evil human. Or I'm sure some of you guys have cut people off on the road. Maybe you cussed out a coworker. The most evil thing I've seen is someone take a leak in the sink of a nightclub bathroom because all the toilets were full. All right, maybe that was me. Nah, I'm kidding. It definitely wasn't. Or was it? You'll never know. I'm joking, it wasn't. But my point with all this is, as regular high-functioning humans within society, we are limited in the scope of how evil we can truly be in this world. But of course, that's not the case with some of our favorite TV shows. When you think evil characters, of course, the first few that pop to mind have got to be Eric Cartman from South Park, Stewie from Family Guy. These are obvious, right? And we will be breaking down their most vile moments. I'd also like to break down all the evil in my favorite show, The Sopranos, but I think that would be like a 4-hour video, so drop a comment if you want that. There will be some unexpected characters in here who sometimes become the villain by accident, or what's the expression? You either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Yeah, well, one of the characters we're gonna talk about became so evil in real life that his character was forced to die off the show and become the villain. But speaking of dying off, I'm sure if you guys are fans of South Park, you remember the episode where the old, bratty, sometimes punching bag of the friend group, Eric Cartman, died off and officially became the evil, conniving, bigoted, hatred-fueled tormentor that we'd grow to know and love for the next 20 plus years. Yes, Eric Cartman's villain arc didn't necessarily just naturally progress throughout South Park. There was a very specific episode that turned little Eric Cartman from naive, obese punching bag to supervillain genius. And this was Scott Tenorman Must Die. If you guys don't know who Scott Tenorman is, well, you might remember later seasons where Cartman says that gingers don't have souls, and even the ones without freckles, daywalkers, they also don't have souls. Yeah, Scott Tenorman was the first soulless ginger who turned Cartman's heart cold. But before he did that, he actually helped Cartman go through puberty. Because yeah, if you guys didn't know, the way that 4th graders are able to tell that they started transitioning into manhood is when they get their first set of pubes. And a little life hack for you. You want to go through puberty faster? You don't necessarily need to grow your own pubes. You just go to the 6th graders and buy some off them. And that's what little genius, Tubby the Tough Talker Eric Cartman did. He runs to the boys, Stan, Carl, Kenny. He's all excited. Hey guys, I just went through puberty. Guess what? I got my first pubes off Scott Tenorman for $10. And I mean, I know Stan's dad, Randy, is a degenerate alcoholic, and Carl's dad, Gerald, is a degenerate gambler who identifies as a dolphin, but I think this instance was a prime example of how not having an active father in his life led Eric to be easily manipulated, get taken advantage of. Like, imagine you went home with a sack of pubes and you said, hey dad, look, I went through puberty. Like, your dad would go knocking on that door of whoever the kid is that sold you the pubes, making sure you get your money back. And it wasn't until Eric killed his father where he finally stepped into the character that we know him for today. What the hell do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if you've been watching South Park, you probably know what I'm talking about, but let's keep going on with this episode and you'll find out. Essentially, Stan and Kyle have to step into that big brother paternal role and be like, hey, Eric, you should probably go back and try and get your money because he sold you a scam. You can't just go through puberty by buying someone else's pubes. Just because the word pubes and puberty sound alike doesn't mean they correlate in terms of becoming a man.
You don't buy pubes, you grow them yourself. What?
So Cartman goes knocking back on Scott Tenorman's door, asking for his $10 back. Tenorman ends up finessing Cartman out of another $6.12. Cartman comes knocking back again to get his money back in exchange for the pubes, but Scott says, do you really want to sell me those pubes? There's a pube fair going on in Fort Collins right now. So Cartman travels all the way there with his sack of pubes, realizing there's no actual pube fest, goes back to Tenorman's house, and this becomes an insane back and forth. Scott then makes Cartman dance like a little piggy in order to get his money back. He doesn't get the money back. Cartman comes up with this grand plan to get Scott Tenorman's favorite band, Radiohead, on a big screen in front of the whole town saying that Scott Tenorman's a loser, when really it's just Cartman doing a voiceover over a clip of Radiohead, and Scott ends up flipping that on Cartman's head, showing the whole town on the big screen a video of Cartman dancing like a little piggy. And this is the last time you see Eric Cartman become the laughingstock of not just his friends, but of the entire town without putting up a fight. Cartman thinks his grand revenge on Scott will be that he will get one of the town's farmer, Bill Denkin's pony, to bite off Scott Tenorman's, I don't know if I could say this word on YouTube, you know, the thing that hangs below your pubes? Yeah, well, Cartman wanted the pony to bite off Scott Tenorman's private part, let's just call it that. And he announces that there's going to be free pony rides at this chili carnival, even getting the actual Radiohead to make an appearance by writing a letter to them saying that Scott Tenorman is dying of cancer and his last wish is to meet Radiohead. So this grand carnival is coming up with the pony rides. It's a big chili competition. Stan and Kyle end up betraying Cartman because, again, back then, this is when Cartman was still the punching bag of the friend group. They tell Scott, hey, at this carnival, watch your back because Cartman is going to get the pony to bite off your carrot. But Cartman actually had a little bit more of a well thought out plan this time around. See, Cartman expected that his friends would betray him and tell Scott about his plan to have the pony bite off his privates, knowing that this would lead Scott to tell his parents and that his parents would go to the ranch to try and have the pony sent to an animal shelter. What they didn't know is that Farmer Denkins shoots trespassers on the spot when they step foot on his ranch. Scott also had a grand plan of putting a bunch of people's pubes in his own chili and feeding it to Cartman during the carnival, but Cartman was one step ahead. He had Chef prepare his own pot of chili. So when Scott told Cartman, hey, come try my chili, let's have a little chili off, Cartman said, sure, Scott, but first you gotta try my chili. I'm working on my Cartman impression. It's gonna get better as this channel progresses. But see, Cartman had swapped the chili. So Scott Tenorman was eating his own chili full of pubes, while Cartman ended up eating Chef's chili. But there was a little more to the story than just that. While the whole town was getting ready to laugh at Cartman for eating a bowl full of meat-soaked pubes, Cartman flips the whole narrative to let Scott know that he was actually the one who ate the pube chili. And not only that, he said, hey, I bet you expect that a pony is here to bite your wiener off, right? Well, what you didn't know is that the farmer whose ranch that pony is on actually shoots trespassers on the spot. So when your parents pulled up to try and get that pony sent to a shelter, yeah, their lives were taken for trespassing. And if that wasn't vile enough, Cartman went on the scene, and as the farmer was giving his report to Officer Barb Brady, Cartman steals the bodies of Scott Tenorman's parents, chops them up, and puts them in the chili that Scott Tenorman is now eating, showing not only Scott Tenorman, but also his friends Stan and Kyle that they should never cross Cartman again.
I made you eat your parents.
And what's even crazier is that while there are several episodes of South Park where Cartman is in search of his real father, especially around the time when he's still that pushover, easy target, by episode 201, long after Cartman has already established himself the villain of South Park, it's revealed that Jack Tenorman, Scott Tenorman's father, actually had an affair with Cartman's mother, which resulted in Cartman's birth, which would make Jack Cartman's father. That same man that Cartman had unalived as revenge for Scott Tenorman selling him his pubes and then feeding that man, Scott Tenorman's dad, back to Scott, that actually ended up being Cartman's father as well. It was almost like Cartman's own father was used as a sacrificial lamb to grant Cartman the psychological powers of forming into the master manipulator that he would then go on to be right after this episode where he feeds Scott Tenorman his parents in a chili. And on a side note, as I'm making this video, I saw a really funny Instagram video, and it's a good prank idea for you guys. Basically, this guy was saying that his friend wrote his phone number on a porta potty and said, send me a picture of your best poop. And that guy every day for 2 years now has been getting pictures of crap sent to him. And not just any crap that comes from people who actually crap in porta potties. And it's an innocent enough prank where you could get away with it because you're not really harming anyone. You just write your friend's phone number on a porta potty, and sure enough, every day for 2 years, now they're getting sent pictures of poop. But what isn't an innocent prank, and is actually more of a war crime, is Cartman feeding Scott Tenorman not only a bunch of pubes in a chili, but also the remnants of his mother and both their father's corpse. And this was just the beginning of Cartman's long path towards an evil, evil life. I mean, we could do a whole video on just all the evil things that Cartman himself has done, but instead I'd like to take you through a couple of my personal favorite highlights. And because I'm a Canadian, and because I'm not so creative and I saw a couple other channels doing this, we're gonna look at some of the worst crimes that Cartman has done and tally up how much prison time he would get if he was a citizen of Canada and did this in the real world. There's of course the episode The Passion of the Juice, where Cartman becomes infatuated with the movie The Passion of the Christ. He looks to Mel Gibson as a godlike figure and dresses up as the Mustache Man, leading a group of people who think they're part of Mel Gibson's fan club, spreading the word of Christ, but really they're spreading German chants around the city, calling for the extermination of Kyle's people. Meanwhile, convincing Kyle that his people are the devil in the process. But speaking of Kyle, that's not the worst thing that Cartman did to his good friend. In season 12, episode 1, Cartman is accidentally given HIV after a botched blood transfusion, and when Kyle thinks this is absolutely hilarious, laughing uncontrollably at the thought of Cartman having HIV, Cartman, who's sad that not enough people are empathetic towards the HIV plight, decides to sneak into Kyle's room while he's sleeping with Butters. He's not sleeping with Butters. Butters joins Cartman while Kyle is sleeping, and they inject Kyle with HIV by drawing Cartman's blood and injecting it into Kyle's mouth. Instead of Cartman getting in the most amount of trouble for giving Kyle a transmitted disease, Kyle actually gets in trouble for tattletaling on Cartman for doing so. And of course, Kyle absolutely hates Cartman for all the crap and bullying and anti-Semitism that Cartman has put Kyle through, right? So when it comes time around for Kyle to celebrate his birthday at Casa Bonita, of course, he decides to invite Butters over Cartman to celebrate his birthday, even though it's Cartman's favorite restaurant. So Cartman cooks up an entire scheme to make Kyle feel like Cartman's actually a genuine friend, and Kyle makes a deal. If for some reason Butters can't show up to the birthday party, Cartman can take his spot and join them at Casa Bonita. So Cartman does anything he could to make sure Butters isn't around for the big night. He ends up telling Butters that a meteor is about to hit Earth and that he's got to hide in a bomb shelter until the chaos dies down. Butters, being the only one naive enough to believe in Cartman's BS, actually does end up hiding in the bomb shelter, and Cartman does his best to keep him there for days on end so that come Saturday, Butters is missing and Cartman can take his place at Casa Bonita. The entire town is looking for Butters. Kyle postpones his birthday party in order to look for him, but Cartman's only concerned with going to that birthday party, so he makes sure Butters stays in that bomb shelter no matter what. He goes and tells Butters that the meteor hit, civilization has crumbled, and that the world is filled with radioactive cannibals. Eventually, police are like, alright, we're gonna check everything, including different wells, sewage systems, and bomb shelters. So Cartman's like, crap, I gotta get Butters out of here and somewhere else. He puts a box over his head to quote-unquote protect him from the radiation, and locks Butters in an abandoned refrigerator at a gas station. Things kind of end up working in Cartman's favor as he does end up making it to Casa Bonita. Of course, it backfires on him, but not nearly as bad as his next Butter scheme does, when he creates an entire scrapbook of different horrible things that he's had Butters do when he's sleeping during their sleepovers, and he tells Stan and Kyle as he shows them this scrapbook that Butters is coming over for another sleepover that night where he's gonna pull the best prank he ever has on Butters. See, just like Cartman being naive enough to think that by owning someone else's pubes, he's now reached puberty, he also thinks that if he puts Butters' genitalia in his mouth, that makes Butters gay. So that's what he does during the sleepover, and as he's all excited to show Stan and Kyle the greatest addition to his butter-bashing book, they inform Cartman that he's sadly mistaken. It's not actually Butters that's gay. Because Cartman put Butters' genitalia in his mouth, that makes Cartman gay. And the only way to reverse it is by Cartman putting his private part in Butters' mouth. So that's Cartman's mission for the rest of the episode. Reverse being gay by putting Butters' mouth on his privates. I'm sure you can imagine how this panned out, right? They plan another sleepover. Cartman says he has a big surprise for Butters. He blindfolds Butters because he says Butters can't see the surprise until it happens. He pulls down his pants, and right as he's about to quote-unquote reverse being gay, Butters' dad walks into the room and witnesses his son about to eat Cartman's meat the same way Cartman tears down Kentucky Fried Chicken skin. Cartman runs off before explaining what could happen, and Butters' dad ends up coming to the conclusion that Butters is bi-curious, so he sends him off to a Christian camp to quote-unquote pray the gay away. Meanwhile, Cartman, who's very excited that he reversed his homosexuality, goes to show the picture to his friends, soon realizing that this does not in fact mean that either of them were gay, but now Stan and Kyle have seen a picture of Cartman both putting Butters' meat in his mouth and having Butters put Cartman's meat in his mouth. And spoiler alert, the entire class ends up seeing it. All thanks to Cartman trying to one-up Stan and Kyle, thinking that they had a copy of the picture. He wanted to one-up them by showing it to the class first before they could. And speaking of Kentucky Fried Chicken skin, there's also that one episode where all the boys are supposed to eat KFC, but Cartman makes them go bring in groceries first so he can steal all the KFC skin for himself, leaving the boys with just the remnants of the boring actual meat of the chicken. And in return, they decide to give Cartman the silence treatment. And Cartman, having such an ego, thinking that his friends would never ignore him, even though he does horrible things to them on a daily basis, he thinks this isn't just the silent treatment, he's actually dead and his ghost is walking around and no one could hear or see him. No one except for Butters, of course, who does not ignore Cartman and instead thinks he can now see dead people. And Cartman ends up using Butters as a pawn to fix all the unfinished business that he left on Earth, trying to make amends so that he can get sent to heaven, but in the process, he basically gets Butters sent to a psych ward. Now, there's a laundry list of other episodes I could list you off, where Cartman treats not only Butters, but all of his friends absolutely horribly. The saddest that comes to mind is when poor little Jimmy has no one show up to his comedy show, and just when he's on the brink of making it in his dream of becoming a rock star comedian, Cartman tries to take full credit for the joke that is sweeping the nation, the iconic fish sticks joke. Of course, it was Jimmy that created it, but Cartman wants all the credit. Now, we are going to give Cartman the credit for the conniving schemes that he concocted that we now just broke down. See, his whole episode with Scott Tenorman alone would get him life imprisonment with no parole for 25 years. That would be on 2 counts of first-degree unaliving, both of Scott Tenorman's parents and Cartman's own father, and indignity to a human body. For deliberately transmitting HIV to Kyle, he would get aggravated assault, which is used in Canada for non-consensual exposure to serious diseases, and that could also give you up to life in prison, but typically around 10 to 20 years. There was also the time when he incited a genocide after leading a death chant drawn from his inspiration of the movie Passion of the Christ, and that could lead him with up to 14 years in prison for public incitement of hatred and advocating genocide. All the different Butters incidents can fit into the category of child endangerment and unlawful confinement, with each of those instances we listed off racking up about 5 to 10 years each. That's a good 150 plus years in prison, multiple life sentences, and no parole for at least 25 to 50 years. But it's a good thing Cartman doesn't have to respect the authority of the Canadian government. But one character who definitely respects the authority of law enforcement and is actually a real human, not a cartoon set in a real state, is none other than Dwight Schrute from The Office. Now, as far as Dwight being evil, I mean, that's up for debate in terms of what you think is evil. For as much of a narc as Dwight is, it's kind of ironic that he ends up sleeping with his coworker Angela, not just in the comfort of their own home or in private. They actually instead decide to start their relationship off in the actual office, sleeping together in the back of the warehouse. They speak in code with no one initially knowing that they're actually dating, and they avoid each other in big group functions. Their relationship is going hot and heavy, with Angela even trusting Dwight enough to take care of her cat for a short period of time, but Dwight, being a farmer at his core, sees a sick animal who's a burden to his owner and decides to do Angela the favor of euthanizing the cat and putting it in her freezer. Angela returns devastated that Dwight has euthanized the cat without her permission, and as revenge, she starts dating Andy Bernard, who comes into the office in season 3 and immediately not only starts flirting with Angela, but also forms a rivalry with Dwight, where they're fighting for who has the most demanding, fake, authoritative position within the office. Assistant to the regional manager, or whatever the hell Andy's title is that he made up. But they'd be fighting for something much bigger very shortly after, because eventually Angela and Andy get engaged. Despite this, though, she still harbors feelings for Dwight and actively arranges secret encounters with Dwight in the office warehouse while she's still engaged to Andy. What's brutal is Angela's disgusted by Andy's touch, but she's cheating on him behind his back with Dwight, going hot and heavy in the warehouse every single day. Eventually, Phyllis ends up publicly exposing Angela's affair with Dwight during an office fundraiser, and when Andy learns of the betrayal, he confronts Dwight and challenges him to a duel for Angela's hand in marriage. Angela, damn near being more evil than Dwight, ends up declaring that she'll honor the duel's outcome, and instead of just deciding who she'd rather be with, she'll end up staying with whoever wins the fight. They end up both deciding that maybe Angela wasn't right for either of them, and the real loser here is really her. But their rivalry would continue, and really would only be kind of one-sided. Andy being pretty kind to Dwight and really focused on a lot of his many issues of his own that he's got to fix, going to anger management and all that, punching a hole in the office. Dwight ends up convincing Andy to sell him his old car, pawns it up for a much higher price, but things reach a climax here when Dwight actually gets his dream job of becoming acting manager of The Office. Ironically, I believe it was Andy that replaced him. But after years of being assistant to the regional manager, Michael Scott leaves The Office, and they need someone with a lot of experience and passion for the job to step into Scott's role. That was none other than Dwight, who becomes power hungry and damn near turns the office into a dictatorship, forcing everyone to take different lunch breaks at different times to increase productivity, with Jim having to take his lunch at like 10 in the morning. But things reach a climax in Dwight's sadistic power struggle when he starts walking around the office with a holster with a loaded firearm in it. Everyone in the office is terrified and demand that Dwight store the firearm safely, and amidst the chaos, Dwight accidentally fires the gun right next to Andy's desk. Shooting it so close to Andy forces him to go to the hospital and temporarily lose hearing in one ear. Dwight tries to cover it up, but eventually admits to it, and Andy ends up replacing him as the acting manager of the office, and then he goes through his own little mental breakdown later in the series. I could touch on more office content, drop a comment if you want that, but we'll continue with a little bit of what Dwight has going on, because setting off a gun in the office isn't even the most evil thing he did throughout the series. That by far has to be in the season 5 episode Stress Relief, when Dwight sets a real fire in a trash can to test the office's emergency preparedness. A lot of Dwight's villainous, evil actions end up really stemming from a place of simply desiring authority. Dwight wants to make sure everyone in the office understands safety protocols in the instance that there is an actual fire in the office. So, to prepare for this case, he locks all the exits, he cuts the phone lines, and he creates an instance where there's a real fire in the office and no way to escape. Amidst this, there's a massive panic amongst everyone who works in the office, and before Dwight could announce that this was just a drill, Stanley, one of the senior members in the office, ends up suffering a heart attack.
Dwight, you do not learn, do you? For a threat to be credible, you have...
Holy
No, you didn't. I'm sick of you and your...
As a result, the entire office is forced to go through CPR training, in which Dwight cuts open the face of the CPR doll and ends up putting it on his own face.
I'm not feeling well. I need to sit down.
Hey, Stanley. Are you okay?
Oh, my God.
Daddy.
Oh, my God.
And I mean, just that image alone should let you know that if Dwight is not evil, then he's at the very least an extremely demented character. And for that, in Canada, he would suffer a couple different legal consequences. I mean, for the firearm alone, right? He'd be charged with careless use of a firearm, unlawful discharge of a firearm, possession of a firearm at a workplace without authorization. That could get you up to 14 years if it's proven reckless endangerment, but usually it's anywhere from 2 to 5 years. There'd definitely be some long-term probation involved there. And even though Dwight maybe never saw behind the bars of a prison cell, our next character most definitely did, on and off the set, and that's none other than the legend Charlie Harper of 2.5 Men. I love this show. I just rewatched it, so if you guys want a slew of content on 2.5 Men specifically, drop a comment. But see, the key difference here is that unlike characters like Dwight or Cartman, whose villainous behavior often involves specific crimes that are depicted on screen, Charlie Harper from 2.5 Men never commits clear criminal or malicious acts in a factual sense. Instead, his moral flaws emerge from a pattern of selfish, insensitive, manipulative behaviors, especially towards women, and of course to his direct family members like his brother Alan, his mother Evelyn, and his nephew Jake. There's this conflicting duality here because although throughout the entire show, Charlie is relentlessly mocking Alan's divorce, his poverty, his parenting, his job struggles, and making him feel like a guest in the house that he lives in throughout the entire show, you have to also remember the fact that Charlie took in Alan at his lowest point.
What are you doing, Alan?
My taxes. I promised myself I wouldn't wait till the last minute this year.
Yeah, and you promised me you'd only stay here for a few days, so your word means nothing.
Alan faced divorce from his wife. She was sucking him dry for any penny he had in alimony checks, and with him on the brink of poverty throughout the entire series, Charlie was the one who gave him a home and basically paid for everything he needed. He also took in Alan's kid Jake, who he constantly used as a babe magnet, and was a horrible influence to the vulnerable, impressionable, damn near like 10 or... This was all just a product of Jake witnessing Charlie's lifestyle. Charlie gambled all the time. He had meaningless intercourse all the time. He drank all the time. He was hammered throughout the entire series. So much so to the point where the real Charlie Sheen was so hammered on the set of 2.5 Men that in the last season, they basically had to write him into scenes where he was... That's only because he loves having Jake around and took in Alan and Jake in a time of need. He's trying to win back his fiancée and be a married, faithful man, and in the process, he was so hungover that he ended up puking on a baby in the coffee shop he's throughout his childhood, and as he actively seeks affection and commitment from several women that he ends up dating, his romantic shortcomings stem from the fact that he never got the for 90% of the entire series. I mean, one thing I could definitely pinpoint that was downright evil is when Alan was at his lowest point, fighting a custody and divorce battle with his ex-wife Judith, who was very evil in her own right, even winning the bet for when Alan would get divorced from his second ex-wife down to the month. But when he was fighting Judith, his first ex-wife, in court, Charlie ends up tagging along for one of the meeting amongst both of their lawyers, because again, Alan is staying at Charlie's house, so Alan has to prove that Charlie is creating an environment that's safe for Jake to live in. Charlie ends up realizing that not only is Alan's lawyer pretty cute, but so is her assistant, so he flirts with both of them. You could see how this would be pretty horrible for Alan, right? Like, the very best case scenario is that Charlie ends up pissing off the lawyer by flirting with her, and Alan gets in crap for it. The worst case scenario is that Charlie ends up sleeping with the lawyer, of course with no intention of actually dating her seriously, breaks her heart, and then she seeks revenge by sucking Alan dry for everything he has in this divorce battle. At first, it seems like the assistant is kind of into Charlie, the lawyer wanting nothing to do with him, but that was actually a front. She actually likes Charlie, ends up sleeping with him, and Charlie has to hide her from him. It ends up being a pretty ugly love triangle. Charlie tells the lawyer, like, hey, look, I've already slept with you. I haven't slept with your assistant yet. She's just as hot as you are, so let me go do my thing with her. We're kind of done here. And of course, you know how this turns out for Alan, right? This is in one of the first few seasons. For the rest of the show, he is paying a blood-sucking amount of alimony, all a product of his lawyer being pissed off that Alan's brother ended up breaking up with her. So she ends up getting Judith everything she wants in the divorce battle, including Alan's soul, basically. And if that wasn't enough, he does find a little bit of happiness in the amazing receptionist that he has later on in the series in Melissa, this short little bubbly girl who is everything Alan could afford after being sucked dry by the 2 divorces he went through. His car breaks down and he needs Charlie to drive him into work, but he has one condition. Do not sleep with the receptionist of my office, because she's amazing, she doesn't ask for much, and if you break her heart, she will break my business. And what do you think Charlie does? That receptionist clocks in and out of a relationship after just one weekend, leaving her devastated and demanding that Alan now gives her health insurance and a raise. And if you don't think Charlie's evil by now, if I don't get copyrighted, I'll play you guys a little montage of how he talks and treats women.
Gonna get married?
No.
Do you like children?
No.
So,
You're usually in a good mood. I figure it's because you have sex.
Jake, it takes more than sex to make a man happy. You also need money. We used to go out.
Did it not end well?
Hey, it went fine for me. Although, in retrospect, I guess I could have handled our parting with a little more tact and sensitivity and a little less, banging her best friend. Alan tells me you're a judge and a professor, and quite frankly, I wasn't expecting someone so,
So what, Charlie?
yummy. What I meant was I was expecting you to be more, dry. But you're not. You're actually kind of
On the character, but we'll leave it at that for this video. But initially, in the first episode, after they kick Charlie off the show, he ends up being announced as dead, and at his funeral, a bowling shirt hangs and all his ex-girlfriends are in attendance. None of them had anything nice to say about him, which is kind of disheartening because there were at the very least 1 or 2 relationships that didn't end off on the worst of terms, and even those women didn't have nice things to say about him. There were a couple small redeeming qualities, but by the end, because the actual actor in Charlie Sheen himself had such a bad split with the directors and creators of the show, they ended up killing him off, making him seem like there was no redeemable qualities. He was a horrible person. Absolutely one specific thing that would actually get him locked up for any serious amount of time. He didn't fire a gun off in front of Jake. He didn't chop up a bunch of pubes and try to reverse it by putting his privates in Alan's mouth or Alan's privates in his mouth. I'm getting confused here, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like, there's nothing specific we could pinpoint here that would get Charlie locked up for life. I think he did have HIV, though, just like Cartman. And that wasn't the character Charlie Harper. That was the real Charlie Sheen. But while Charlie's character throughout the show was by far not the most evil person on this list, but ended up becoming vilified in the series finale in a way that no other character on this list ever did, the final character on this list has actually ended up pulling a complete 180 to Charlie Harper's arc. Instead of going from bad to worse, Stewie Griffin ended up going from evil to kind of just whatever. The new seasons of Family Guy just piss me off, man. Like, these writers are evil for keeping the show on this long when it's running the way it is right now. If you guys want like a full, I don't even know, dissection of how Family Guy has completely lost the plot, no pun intended, I could do that. But one thing that definitely stands out from the show is how deranged the little baby used to be. It's crazy how the show has kind of evolved, right? Like, Brian Griffin, the dog, was the most human element of the entire show. It was kind of like Seth MacFarlane, the creator of the show, speaking through Brian throughout the entire first few seasons. He was like the voice of reason. All of Seth's like political and religious beliefs were channeled through Brian, and he was the one kind of keeping the entire family balanced. The same can't be said for the youngest character in the show, Stewie Griffin. Since the pilot, Stewie has been on a mission to unalive his own mother, Lois, for no apparent reason except for the fact that if you guys came from Rapaholics, what does Kendrick say? I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk, I hate the way that you dress. Yeah, the way Kendrick looks at Drake, that's how Stewie Griffin looks at Lois Griffin. He's got a pistol in his tuna sandwich and attempts to get her clipped in the first episode of the show. By the second season, he's planting a mind control device on Chris and has Chris attempt to do his dirty work by trying to unalive Lois. And while he can't get Chris to actually perform any physical harm on their mother, he does end up performing some pretty considerable physical harm to Chris himself.
It was designed for writers, but when I sat down to work, it just wasn't flowing through me.
Do you have a receipt?
No, can't you just look it up?
Do you have the credit card you used to pay for it?
Well, I actually paid using store credit for another return.
Do you have the original packaging for the item?
No, that's probably with the receipt.
Of course, you can't forget when he did the same to Brian, when Brian lost a bet to him and owed him $50. Do I really need to play that scene? You know the scene. Where's my money, man? Yeah, he ends up smacking a glass of orange juice against Brian's face and lighting him on fire.
Hey, Brad?
Yeah.
There's glass in my eye! Oh, son of a...
And all of Stewie's evil attempts on Lois's life would end up capitulating in the two-part series Stewie Kills Lois and Lois Kills Stewie, where Stewie is mad that Lois and Peter forgot to bring him on a cruise that they were going on, and in return, he actually boards the cruise ship and finally takes her life. Well, sort of. See, Peter is framed for the unaliving, and while they're in court, Lois comes rushing through the courtroom doors, announces that it was actually Stewie that tried to take her life. She survived, and Stewie escapes the courtroom and attempts to concoct a plan for world domination. While this fails, and Peter ends up taking Stewie's life at the end of the series, it ends up all being a simulation. Amongst one of the many devices that Stewie has was a simulator that can run an alternate universe to show you what would happen if you tried to make some things happen, right? So Stewie puts some money on Lois's head and tests out the outcome for what would truly happen, right? And at one point, he's ruling the world. He's powerful. But by the end of it, it all comes crashing down. And that's when Stewie realizes, all right, maybe I don't have this all figured out. Maybe I can't unalive her yet. Let me go back to the drawing board. And from there, it kind of seems like Stewie becomes a lot more tame of a character in the sense that he kind of just puts the plan of unaliving Lois on the back burner and focuses more on some one-off evil shenanigans. Like the time where he makes a bet with Brian that he could become the most popular kid at school. He ends up doing so and dating the Meg bully, Connie D'Amico. And while they're about to do the deed in her car, Stewie pulls down his pants and she realizes he has a really small you-know-what. You know, the thing that Cartman was getting the pony to bite off of Scott Tenorman? So Stewie ends up becoming the butt of the joke. Or should I say the bulge of the joke? Drop a like for that terrible joke. But Stewie seeks a little bit of revenge. See, he goes on to say, Connie, you know, I know I did you wrong by having a tiny schlong, but can I just get one more kiss before we part ways? And when Connie agrees to it, and they lean in for a kiss, Stewie takes off his wig and all of his clothes and reveals to the entire school that Connie is now kissing a baby.
And I apologize, but before I go, could I maybe have one last kiss?
Well, I guess so.
Look, this girl is making out with a baby, a nude baby.
This would probably get Connie more jail time than Stewie, but rest assured, with all the evil things Stewie has done throughout his tenure on the show, there is no guaranteed he would end up in jail for probably twice as long as Cartman when it was all said and done and you tallied up all his crimes. What about that time when the family got a new dog, new Brian, and Stewie ends up unaliving him, putting him in a trash can, and throwing him out on the curb? Or the time where he steals old Brian's car and crashes it? Didn't he also kill off like all of Brian's different siblings and make Brian watch it? Didn't he also create a clone of Brian and a clone of Stewie who were both so deformed and like pre-developed that they ended up disintegrating? I don't even know what the hell happened to them. That was definitely torture of a conscious being. Speaking of torture, there was also that time when Peter and Stewie were bonding for, I think, the first time ever in the show over torturing Lois in various different ways. There was also that time when Stewie actually fell in love with a little baby by the name of Olivia, who wanted more of a mature partner. And Stewie ends up realizing from Quagmire that all he has to do is treat her like crap and she'll come running back to him. For now, because eventually she would end up cheating on him kind of by playing Play-Doh in a box house that they built with another baby, and when Stewie finds out, he ends up burning the whole thing down. There was also that time that he was left alone in the house when the rest of the family forgot him when they were on their way to a vacation spot, and because of that, Peter calls Quagmire and Cleveland to come babysit Stewie, but Stewie, thinking they're intruders, ends up knocking them out, spraying tear gas on them, and chains them to the basement wall, forcing them to watch an infomercial for I don't even know how many hours. On repeat. Wasn't there also an episode where he built a device to amplify his evilness and it ended up concocting an evil Stewie clone as if the original Stewie wasn't evil enough? Listen, you add all these things up, that's like 10 life sentences right there. What's worse, right? Like Cartman unintentionally unalived his own father and then fed it to his father's other son. But Stewie having such a deranged fantasy of unaliving his own mother that he knows is his own mother sets up an entire simulation to see what would happen if he actually does it. And his best friend and kind of brother in Brian, he ends up unaliving his entire family and beating the crap out of him constantly. Now, I'm going to be a little evil here too because I think I put Bender from Futurama in the thumbnail, but we don't have enough time to talk about him, alright? So if you want a video dissecting Bender, Futurama, maybe more 2.5 Men, South Park, Family Guy, whatever the hell you guys want, drop a comment, and don't be evil, alright? Subscribe and like. We're a brand new channel here if you're a Labrian Gentlegram. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Yes, all these characters have raised some hell, but I hope you're doing well, and thank you for hearing me tell the tale of a foxtail. I don't have a formal outro or intro, so for now I'll leave you guys at that, alright? This is fun though, let me know. Would you rather hear me talk about more cartoons, like South Park, Family Guy, Futurama, etc., or more live action stuff? Is that what you'd call it? Like when there's real humans in the show? 2.5 Men, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Sopranos. We definitely got to touch on some Sopranos here. Maybe some movies too, I don't know. You guys let me know. Drop a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.